Have you ever loved someone who seemed to be running from love itself? Someone who appeared to crave connection one moment, only to pull away the next? Someone who built walls where bridges should have been, creating distance precisely when the relationship was becoming more meaningful? It can leave you feeling as though you're constantly reaching for someone who is always just out of reach, never quite knowing whether to move closer or step back. Perhaps you've watched them withdraw after moments of genuine intimacy, just when conversations became deeper, affection became stronger, or the future started to feel real. They suddenly became quieter, texts slowed down, plans became uncertain. They seemed emotionally unavailable without ever explaining why. Instead of leaning into the relationship, they retreated into themselves, leaving you confused about what had changed. To the person on the receiving end, this behavior often feels deeply personal. It's easy to believe you've done something wrong, that you've become too much, asked for too much, or somehow pushed them away. You replay conversations in your head, searching for the exact moment everything shifted. You wonder if they stopped loving you, lost interest, or found someone else. The silence becomes louder than any argument ever could. But sometimes the person pulling away isn't running from you at all. They're running from what genuine closeness awakens inside them. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, emotional intimacy can feel surprisingly overwhelming. Love isn't always experienced as comfort. It can also trigger vulnerability, dependence, and the fear of losing control. The closer they feel to someone, the more exposed they may feel emotionally. Their nervous system interprets deep connection not only as something beautiful, but also as something risky. That's why their behavior can seem so contradictory. They may genuinely enjoy your company, think about you constantly, and care about you far more than they ever admit. Yet those same feelings can activate powerful protective habits. Instead of expressing what they feel, they distract themselves with work, hobbies, independence, or emotional distance. Instead of saying, "I'm scared," they simply disappear for a while. Instead of asking for reassurance, they convince themselves they don't need anyone. From the outside, it can look cold or indifferent. Underneath, it may be anything but. Many avoidant individuals learned early in life that relying on others felt unsafe or disappointing. Whether through inconsistent caregiving, emotional neglect, or experiences where vulnerability led to pain, they gradually developed a belief that depending on someone was dangerous. Over time, self-reliance became their emotional armor. It protected them, but it also made healthy intimacy incredibly difficult. So when someone truly begins to matter, an internal conflict begins. One part of them longs for the closeness they've secretly wanted all along. Another part urges them to create distance before they become too emotionally dependent or before they risk getting hurt. These two forces can exist at the same time, creating confusing behavior that even they may not fully understand. This doesn't mean every emotionally distant person has an avoidant attachment style, nor does it excuse behaviors that are consistently hurtful, dismissive, or emotionally unavailable. Healthy relationships still require communication, accountability, respect, and mutual effort. Understanding someone's fears is different from accepting repeated emotional neglect. Still, recognizing these patterns can replace confusion with clarity. Instead of assuming their distance automatically means they never cared, you begin to see that emotional withdrawal and emotional indifference are not always the same thing. Sometimes the person who seems to be running from the relationship is actually running from the vulnerability that love demands. That realization doesn't guarantee the relationship will work. It doesn't promise they'll overcome those fears or suddenly become emotionally available. Real change requires self-awareness, healing, and a willingness on their part to confront the patterns that keep them disconnected. But it does remind you of something important. People can desperately want love while simultaneously fearing everything that real love requires. They can crave intimacy while instinctively pushing it away. They can hide behind silence even while their heart quietly aches for closeness. And perhaps the greatest lesson is this: loving someone with those struggles should never require abandoning yourself. Compassion is valuable, but so are your own emotional needs. The healthiest relationships are not built on chasing someone through their walls. They're built when two people are willing, in their own time and through their own effort, to slowly lower those walls together. Sometimes the people who seem the most unreachable are the ones feeling things the most intensely. They just don't know how to let it show. But when real love finally reaches them, something starts to change. When an avoidant person begins to genuinely experience love, what unfolds inside them is quiet, rare, and deeply meaningful, an internal shift that challenges every defense they've spent a lifetime building. For most of their lives, avoidant people lean on control like it's armor. They try to control their emotions, their surroundings, and especially the way they connect with other people, because control has always felt like the only reliable form of safety in a world that once felt chaotic or unsafe to them. Somewhere along the way, life taught them that being vulnerable gets you hurt or rejected, so they learned to retreat behind independence and self-reliance instead. But real love has a way of quietly dismantling that illusion of control. For the first time, they find themselves feeling things they can't manage, suppress, or explain away logically. Genuine love has a knack for reaching the places an avoidant person guards most fiercely. It doesn't force sudden change. Instead, it slowly creates moments where control simply stops working. At first, this might confuse them. They start noticing feelings that make them uneasy: longing, tenderness, the fear of losing someone, or this pull toward closeness, even while every instinct is telling them to run. That internal tug of war is actually the starting point of their transformation. When an avoidant person starts to loosen their grip on control, it's a sign that love has found its way into the most protected corners of their mind. They begin to understand that constantly controlling everything only isolates them further, while allowing themselves to be vulnerable, even though it terrifies them, brings a kind of peace that control never could. This shift usually isn't dramatic or obvious to anyone watching from the outside. It shows up in small, quiet ways. A softer tone of voice, a rare moment of genuine openness about something personal, or an apology where they once would have simply shut down and walked away. These small moments might not look like much, but for an avoidant person, they're enormous. Each one represents them choosing truth over control. It's almost like love is gently telling them that being open isn't the same as being weak, and that letting someone see you doesn't automatically mean getting hurt. Slowly, their heart starts absorbing lessons their mind has resisted for years, that real connection requires some uncertainty, and that love simply can't grow in a space where control has to be absolute. As they start to actually feel this kind of authentic love, they'll likely find themselves caught between old habits and new emotions. They might pull away and then come back, almost testing whether the connection can survive their fear. But even during those retreats, there's an awareness growing underneath. They know something in them is shifting. What used to feel completely unbearable starts to feel meaningful, maybe even necessary. They begin to understand that love was never about power or self-protection. It's about letting someone into the space where their real self actually lives. It's not that the fear of intimacy disappears entirely. It's that love slowly becomes stronger than that fear. This gradual willingness to be vulnerable is one of the clearest signs that an avoidant person is feeling something genuine. They start trading avoidance for presence, control for trust, and emotional distance for real openness. You might notice them admitting when they're wrong, actually asking for reassurance, or expressing affection more freely than before. All rare and meaningful signs that they're learning to exist inside love instead of constantly escaping from it. In these moments, they're no longer acting purely out of self-protection. They're motivated by something deeper, the desire to hold on to a connection that finally feels real and irreplaceable. When an avoidant person lets go of control, even just a little, it reveals how deep their feelings actually run. They're stepping directly into the space that used to terrify them, vulnerability, and discovering that it doesn't break them, it heals them. This isn't weakness, it's genuine courage. For someone whose emotional survival has always depended on staying in control, opening up to another person is about as clear a sign of real love as you'll ever get. One of the most telling shifts you'll notice when an avoidant person starts to feel real love is in how they handle emotional intensity. Typically, avoidant people cope with strong feelings by pulling away, shutting down, or disappearing entirely. When emotions run too high, their instinct is to retreat into solitude, believing that distance is what protects them from getting overwhelmed or hurt. This reaction isn't rooted in not caring, it's rooted in fear. Fear of being consumed, fear of rejection, fear of being too exposed. Withdrawing has always been their survival strategy in relationships. This shift from constantly withdrawing to actually staying present doesn't happen overnight. It's slow, fragile, and easy to miss, but it's one of the strongest indicators that they're learning to love in a real, conscious way. Emotional presence means they stop disappearing during arguments or hard conversations. Instead of going quiet the moment things get emotional, they stay and actually listen. Instead of pretending indifference, they start expressing concern, even if it comes out a little awkward. That's a massive shift because staying in those moments means facing everything they've always feared: rejection, losing control, being emotionally exposed. Yet love gives them the strength to sit with that discomfort. They might still fumble for the right words, but their actions start to say what they can't quite verbalize yet, that they care enough to stay, to try to understand, to actually connect. In authentic love, presence becomes more than just physical closeness. It becomes emotional honesty. The avoidant person starts letting their partner glimpse what's really happening underneath their composed exterior. They might open up about stress, sadness, or confusion over their own feelings. It might seem like a small thing, but for them it's an enormous act of trust. It means they no longer feel like they need to hide behind silence or emotional distance to stay safe. When they start engaging instead of escaping, it's because they've recognized that connecting emotionally doesn't mean disappearing into someone else. It can mean being fully seen and still fully accepted. You might also notice a shift in timing during emotional moments where they once needed days apart after any conflict. Now they come back sooner, or sometimes they don't leave at all. Their nervous system, once wired for flight, starts learning a new kind of regulation, one built on connection instead of distance. It's not that they've stopped fearing closeness. It's that love is teaching them a new kind of safety, one that doesn't come from isolating themselves, but from actually being understood. Staying emotionally present becomes their new form of strength, a quiet form of rebellion against everything they used to believe about relationships. Over time, this presence deepens further. They start showing up emotionally in everyday moments, not just during serious conversations, but in small acts of affection, humor, or comfortable silence shared together. They start asking how you're feeling, noticing when something seems off, or offering reassurance without being asked. Their empathy grows, even if it's expressed in subtle, understated ways. It's a slow unfolding of their capacity to love deeply, while still staying grounded in the connection. Every time they choose to stay instead of retreat, the bond strengthens and it heals some of the old wounds that used to keep them distant. When an avoidant person stays emotionally present instead of vanishing, it's a quiet but powerful statement about how they feel. It means they're learning to coexist with emotion rather than run from it, and to hold space for both your feelings and their own instead of fleeing from either. It reflects a real internal shift, the point where love becomes stronger than fear and where connection starts to feel safer than being alone. Another major shift you'll notice when an avoidant person starts feeling real love is in how they relate to space and closeness. Avoidant people are naturally drawn toward distance. It's their comfort zone, their emotional breathing room. Space gives them a sense of control, freedom, and steadiness in a world that has often felt overwhelming or unpredictable to them. Experience taught them that closeness can lead to pain, rejection, or losing themselves in someone else. Needing another person can feel genuinely dangerous to them because it threatens the independence they've worked so hard to protect and stirs up vulnerability they'd rather keep buried. This realization doesn't happen quickly. It builds gradually through repeated experiences that show them closeness doesn't have to come with pressure, that they can share space with someone without sacrificing their independence. As that understanding grows, their instinct to run starts to fade, replaced by a quieter, deeper pull toward connection. You'll notice this in small, almost unnoticeable moments. Someone who used to need long stretches of alone time after a heavy conversation might now reach out sooner. They might initiate contact instead of waiting to be reached out to first. They start checking in, asking how you're doing, or simply wanting to spend time together without needing a distraction to fill the space. These gestures might seem minor, but they carry enormous meaning. Every time they move toward connection instead of away from it, they're overriding years of old conditioning. Their heart is starting to trust what their mind once rejected, that intimacy can actually be safe, even comforting. For avoidant people, seeking connection means they're no longer relying on distance to regulate their emotions. In the past, pulling away was how they calmed themselves and restored a sense of safety. But genuine love introduces a completely different kind of regulation, one built on emotional closeness instead of separation. They begin associating your presence with comfort instead of threat. They start to realize that connection can actually soothe their anxiety rather than amplify it. Love begins rewiring their nervous system, teaching them that the right person doesn't smother them. They offer the grounding they've always needed but never let themselves have. At first, this new pattern can be confusing for them. Their usual craving for distance starts fading, replaced by a longing for closeness they never used to allow themselves to feel. This can leave them feeling unusually exposed because for the first time, their real emotional needs are rising to the surface. They might quietly admit, even if only to themselves, that they miss you when you're not around, or that being near you brings them a sense of calm and security. As frightening as this new emotional dependency can feel to them, it's actually proof of real love taking root. They start craving not just your physical presence, but your understanding, your warmth, your emotional energy, the very things they used to push away. Over time, this pull toward connection reshapes the way they love. Instead of pulling back during emotionally uncomfortable moments, they start reaching out for reassurance. Instead of silencing their needs, they start voicing them. They might not use big, sweeping declarations, but their behavior speaks volumes. A text sent when they'd normally stay quiet, showing up somewhere they'd usually avoid, a gentle touch offered when they'd once have pulled away. These are all signs that love is starting to guide their choices more than fear is. When an avoidant person starts choosing connection over distance, it's a powerful reflection of how deep their feelings really go. It means love has softened the walls that once kept everyone at arm's length. They no longer view closeness as a threat to their freedom, but as a safe place where their real self can finally exist without judgment. This shift from needing space to actually craving closeness marks the moment when love stops being theoretical and becomes real. The moment fear loses its grip and connection becomes their new source of safety. Another clear sign that an avoidant person is experiencing real love is a growing consistency in their actions. Avoidant people are often known for being unpredictable in relationships, warm and affectionate one moment, distant and closed off the next. That inconsistency isn't a sign of not caring. It comes from the internal conflict between wanting closeness and fearing it. Their behavior fluctuates because their emotions do. For them, love is both magnetic and threatening at the same time. It pulls them in while simultaneously scaring them. But when they start experiencing love that feels grounded and real, something inside them begins to steady. They stop feeling as ruled by their fears, and their behavior slowly starts to line up with their actual feelings. They begin showing up in ways that reflect real emotional investment, not out of obligation, but because they genuinely want to. Authentic love has a grounding effect on avoidant people. At first, they might resist it, unsure how to exist inside something that requires presence, honesty, and follow-through. But gradually, the steadiness of real love starts to dissolve their inner chaos. They start to understand that consistency isn't the same as being trapped, it's safety. Once they feel emotionally secure in the relationship, their actions become more dependable. You'll see it in their tone, in their timing, in whether they actually follow through on what they say. They start texting when they say they will, showing up when they promise to, following through on commitments they used to avoid entirely. It's not that they've suddenly become perfect, it's that love has given them something stronger than fear, purpose. Their emotional world, once ruled by avoidance, starts to find balance. Consistency becomes their quiet way of saying what words can't fully capture. For an avoidant person, big emotional declarations can feel overwhelming, but showing up reliably becomes their way of revealing their heart. This might come through steady communication, thoughtful gestures, or simply staying connected during hard moments instead of disappearing. Love starts to replace their impulse to run with a genuine desire to stay. They begin prioritizing the relationship even when it feels uncomfortable, slowly learning that real love isn't about constant excitement or freedom. It's built on trust, patience, and emotional steadiness. This kind of consistency doesn't come easily for them. It requires facing parts of themselves they've kept hidden for a long time. Impatience, self-doubt, fear of being vulnerable. But love has a way of pulling them beyond those old patterns. They start genuinely caring about how their actions affect you. They begin factoring your feelings into their decisions. Where they once acted purely to protect themselves, now they act with real consideration. Every act of reliability, every time they follow through, every time they choose to stay instead of retreat when things get difficult, is a quiet but real declaration of love. It means they're learning that relationships aren't about control or escape, but about stability and growing together. You may start to notice that they stop using distance as a punishment or a form of self-protection. When conflict comes up, instead of disappearing for days, they try to work through it. When they make mistakes, they start owning up to them, even apologizing, something they may never have done before. This shows they value the relationship more than protecting their ego. It's love teaching them accountability, showing them that consistency is what builds trust, and trust is what sustains love. Their actions, once so unpredictable, start to reflect real emotional maturity and genuine devotion. Over time, this steadiness becomes a new kind of emotional language for them. They start understanding that love isn't proven through intensity, but through dependability. They may still have moments of fear, but those fears no longer control their choices. Instead, they act from a place of care, presence, and respect. The person who once ran from closeness now builds it through the small, steady ways they keep showing up. This is where authentic love truly reveals itself, the point where fear stops leading and consistency becomes the way they naturally express love. Perhaps one of the deepest and most telling transformations you'll see in an avoidant person experiencing real love is their growing willingness to actually be seen. Avoidant people spend much of their lives hiding their emotions, their fears, even parts of who they are that they believe are too fragile to expose. They often present a mask of independence and composure to shield themselves from the vulnerability that comes with real closeness. Being truly seen feels dangerous to them because it stirs up old memories of times when being open led to rejection, judgment, or shame. Somewhere early on, they learned that self-protection was necessary for survival, so they built an inner fortress designed to keep everyone out. But when real love enters their life, it starts to challenge that fortress. Their desire for connection slowly begins to outweigh their instinct to hide, and little by little, they start allowing another person to witness who they actually are. This doesn't happen all at once. In the beginning, their vulnerability might only show up in brief flashes. Maybe their guard drops slightly after an argument, or they share something personal from their past, or they let an emotion show that they'd normally keep buried. These moments are small, but for an avoidant person, they're huge. They mark the point where love starts to outweigh fear. They begin to understand that being truly loved means being truly known, not the version of themselves they present to the world, but the version that exists underneath all the defenses. Authentic love gives them the courage to let that version be seen. Letting themselves be known means they start sharing what they used to keep locked away, their insecurities, their doubts, their fear of not being enough. They might start opening up about childhood experiences or past relationships that shaped why they became avoidant in the first place. This kind of openness isn't a bid for sympathy, it's a sign of real trust. It shows they feel safe enough with you to reveal parts of themselves they usually keep hidden. It's a quiet but meaningful admission that they believe their honesty won't be used against them. Even small moments of transparency signal that the protective walls they built are starting to crack under the warmth of genuine care. Their vulnerability starts showing up in their behavior too. Someone who used to avoid emotional conversations altogether might start initiating them. Someone who deflected feelings with humor or logic might start actually sitting with those feelings instead. They might admit when they're hurt, jealous, or scared of losing you, feelings they used to deny even to themselves. These admissions aren't easy for them. Every word is a step into unfamiliar territory, but love gives them the courage to stay there anyway. By showing their weaknesses, they're handing you a piece of their inner world, trusting that you'll handle it gently. That trust is one of the clearest signs of real love there is. Being truly seen also means they let you witness their imperfections. They stop working so hard to appear unshaken or in complete control. You start seeing their unfiltered emotions, their laughter, their frustration, their confusion, their tenderness. They stop performing and start actually existing honestly within the relationship. For someone who has spent so much of their life behind emotional walls, this kind of openness is a genuine act of freedom. It means they're no longer living in fear of judgment or rejection. They're choosing authenticity over image. Love has given them permission to exist fully, without pretending to be stronger or more distant than they actually are. None of this means an avoidant person suddenly becomes completely open overnight. There will still be moments when they pull back or struggle to put what they're feeling into words. But the real difference is that now, they come back. They return to explain, to reconnect, to repair what feels broken. That return is their way of showing that they care too much to stay hidden. They've come to understand that love can't grow in isolation. It needs openness, honesty, and emotional visibility. So when an avoidant person finally lets you see them, their fears, their softness, their humanity, that's not just vulnerability. That's love, in its most honest and authentic form. Love that dares to be seen, even while it's still trembling. When an avoidant person begins to feel real love, it's never a loud or dramatic transformation. It's a quiet unfolding of the heart. Their walls don't collapse all at once. They soften slowly, piece by piece, through trust, patience, and genuine connection. Love teaches them something fear never could, that being vulnerable isn't weakness, and that closeness isn't a trap. You'll see it in the way they choose to stay instead of run, to speak instead of hide, to care instead of control. Their love won't always come through in words. It will show up in their effort, their presence, and their willingness to finally let themselves be seen. When an avoidant person chooses connection over distance, when they risk being truly known after a lifetime of hiding, that is love in its most real and honest form. A love that isn't just felt, but fought for.